Good morning. My name is Kate Fassett, and I'm your worship associate today. Thank you for being here with me. When I was around 11 years old, I started getting a little sneaky at bedtime. I'd keep a flashlight and this book under my bed, the Random House Book of Poetry for Children. When my thoughts couldn't settle, I found a nice little escape in silly poetry. Not only did I like the poems, the way they made me laugh and feel lighter, I also loved the repetition. The poems stayed exactly the same, while everything else was changing. They had a pattern, a beat that I connected with. Here are a few favorites that even when I read them now, they just soften the edges, help me feel more grounded, and connect with my silly side. The first one is Some Things Don't Make Any Sense at All by Judith Viorst. My mom says I'm her sugar plum. My mom says I'm her lamb. My mom says I'm completely perfect just the way I am. My mom says I'm a super special, wonderful, terrific little guy. My mom just had another baby. Why? I love getting my daughters laughing on that one too. Here's another one if you'll indulge me. I wish I could meet the man that knows. I wish I could meet the man that knows, who put the fly on my daddy's nose. When my daddy was taking a nap today, I tried to slap that fly away. So daddy could sleep, but just as my hand came down to slap him, the fly jumped, and I hit with a bang. Where do you suppose? Smack on the end of daddy's nose. Ow, cried daddy, and up he jumped. He jumped so hard that he thump-bumped his head on the wall. Well, I tried to say, see, daddy, I slapped the fly away. And I should think he would have thanked me. But what do you think he did? He spanked me. I was just trying to help, I said, but daddy was looking very red. For trying to help, I have to thank you. But for that smack on the nose, I'll spank you. And up in the air went his great big hand, and he said, I hope you understand. It's my nose I'm spanking for, not the fly. For the fly, I thank you. And that is why I wish I could meet the man that knows, who put the fly on my daddy's nose. For when I find him, I want to thank him. And as I do, I want to spank him. Okay, last but not least. This one always gets me. It is classic, you guys. It is by Anonymous. The title is Toot Toot. I wish you could see the pictures too. A peanut sat on a railroad track. His heart was all aflutter. The 5:15 came rushing by. Toot toot, peanut butter. When I was in high school, we had a unit on Canterbury Tales. For some reason, I was completely taken with those stories, the cadence and flow, the slightly risque nature of the content. The collection of stories was written in the 14th century in Middle English by Geoffrey Chaucer. I was so captivated by these stories that I went for extra credit and wrote a few of my own, modeling the Middle English style of writing. In case you're wondering, I was not that cool in high school. There was a common thread between my early love of silly, rhyming poetry and my fascination with Chaucer's work. I realize now that I still get this sense of satisfaction from a well-structured stanza in a hip-hop song, a joke that lands just so, or a riddle that gives me a moment of pause. Playing with words and letting words be a source of fun and enjoyment. I like that.
Our reading today is Thank You by Ross Gay. If you find yourself half naked and barefoot in the frosty grass, hearing again the earth's great sonorous moan that says, "You are the air of the now and gone," that says all you love will turn to dust and will meet you there, do not raise your fist. Do not raise your small voice against it, and do not take cover. Instead, curl your toes into the grass. Watch the cloud ascending from your lips. Walk through the garden's dormant splendor. Say only thank you. Thank you. I think I was in the 3rd grade when I memorized my first real poem. My memory is fuzzy, but I think maybe it was a school talent show. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land and 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. I am not sure why I memorized a poem for the school talent show, but I think I blame my great Auntie Margie, who lived kitty corner from us when I was in elementary school, and she, born in 1908, grew up in an era where memorization was a prized skill and the way many people learned. But in my era of schooling, memorization wasn't a sought-after skill any longer, especially poetry memorization. What memorization there was mostly involved math facts and spelling rules, and was often made much easier by music a la Schoolhouse Rock, which taught my Generation X peers history, multiplication, civics, and grammar all set to music in between Saturday morning cartoons. Okay, we are gonna see if we can do this, okay? If you know it, please sing it. A noun is a... Thank you. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Hooking up cases and clauses. Okay, all right, somebody got it. But poetry holds a special place in my heart nonetheless. I have found comfort and joy in poetry that inspires and explains the world to me in a different way. I love, as many of you know, the nature poems of Mary Oliver and the way she sees the world and is deeply a part of it. I love Wendell Berry, especially the piece of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives might be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still waters, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. I love the joy of E.E. Cummings. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirit of trees, for the true blue dream of sky, for everything that is natural, that is infinite, that is yes. I love the deeply human poems of Naomi Shihab Nye, a Palestinian-American poet whose Gate A4 poem speaks about her attempts to soothe a woman who speaks only Arabic and panics when thinking her flight is canceled, and how they end up sharing cookies and apple juice with everyone at the gate. And I looked around the gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those women too. This can still happen everywhere. Not everything is lost. And when I planned a poetry service today, I wanted to find something new to share with you. So if you bet somebody that I would quote Mary Oliver, you just lost. The End of Life Matters group is leading a series of conversations called the Date with Death Club. They'll meet every fourth Sunday after service, and we'll discuss a bunch of different topics. In February, Michael Matsumura and I will co-lead a conversation about death, dying, and poetry. And so I took inspiration from there for today's poems. Poetry gives us space to talk and write about all kinds of issues, but issues of death and dying and the living that happens in the face of that are some of the most important things in life. Ross Gay is a newer poet that I really enjoy. His biography on his website reads, Ross Gay is interested in joy. Ross Gay wants to understand joy. Ross Gay is curious about joy. Ross Gay studies joy. Something like that. How can you not love that, especially right now? He also writes short poetic essays published in collections called The Book of Delights, Inciting Joy, and The Book of More Delights. But he doesn't shy away from the heavy stuff either. He wrote Thank You, our reading today. But he also wrote A Small Needful Fact, which is a poem about Eric Garner, who was the black man killed by New York City police as they arrested him for selling cigarettes on the street by kneeling on his chest as he repeated, I can't breathe. A small needful fact is that Eric Garner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means, perhaps, that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants, which most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and to smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. And another poem called Burial. You're right. The fertilizer's good. It wasn't a gang of dullards came up with chucking a fish in the planting hole, or some midwife got lucky with the placenta. Oh, I'll plant a tree here. And all of a sudden, a flush of quince and jam enough for months. Yes, the magic dust our bodies become casts spells on the roots, about which a dumber man than me could tell you the chemical processes, but it's just magic to me. Which is why a couple springs ago, when first putting in my 2 bare root plum trees out back, I took the jar, which has become my father's house, and lonely for him, and hoping to coax him back for my mother as much as me, poured some of him in the planting holes, and he dove in, glad for the robust air, saddling a slight gust into my nose and mouth, chuckling as I coughed. But mostly he disappeared into the minor yawns in the earth into which I placed the trees, splaying wide their roots, casting the gray dust of my old man evenly throughout the hole, replacing then the clods of dense Indiana soil until the roots and my father were buried. Watering it all with one hand while holding the tree with the other as straight as the flag to the nation of simple joy of which my father is now a naturalized citizen, waving the flag from his subterranean lair. The roots curled around him like shawls or jungle gyms, like hookahs or the arms of ancestors, before breaststroking into the xylem, riding the elevator up through the cambium and into the leaves, where when you put your ear close enough, you can hear him whisper, "Good morning." Where if you close your eyes and push your face, you can feel his stubbly jowls, and good Lord, this year he was giddy at first, at the first real fruit set, and nestled into the 30 or 40 plums in the 2 trees, peering out from the sweet meat with his hands pressed against the purple skin like cathedral glass. And imagine his joy as the sun wizarded forth those abundant sugars, and I plodded barefoot and prayerful at the first ripe plums swell and blush, almost weepy, conjuring some surely ponderous verse to convey this bottomless grace. You know, oh father, kind of stuff. Hundreds of hot air balloons filling the sky in my chest, replacing his intubated body, listing like a boat keel side up, replacing the steady stream of water from the one eye which his brother wiped before removing the tube, keeping his hand on the forehead until the last wind in his body wandered off, while my brother wailed like an animal. And my mother said, weeping, "It's okay. It's okay. You can go, honey." At all of which, my father guffawed by kicking from the first bite buckets of juice down my chin, staining one of my 2 button-down shirts, the salmon-colored silk one, hollering, "There's more of that," almost dancing now in the plum, in the tree, the way he did as a person, bent over and biting his lip and chucking the one hip out, and then the other with his elbows cocked and fists loosely made, and eyes closed and mouth made trumpet, when he knew he could make you happy just by being a little silly and sweet. I love the images of this poem, of the tree roots curling through the author's father's bones as his spirit becomes part of the plums, kicking buckets of juice out, where anything can make you happy just by being a little silly and sweet. And as I was researching poems for this service, I especially loved learning the story about Laura Gilpin. She was a poet who had a posthumous burst of fame after an old poem of hers written in the 1970s was rediscovered during the pandemic and made into a meme and a comic and even a popular tattoo. That poem is The Two-Headed Calf by Laura Gilpin. Tomorrow, when the farm boys find this freak of nature, they will wrap his body in newspaper and carry him to the museum. But tonight, he is alive and in the north field with his mother. It is a perfect summer evening. The moon rising over the orchard, the wind in the grass, and as he stares into the sky, there are twice as many stars as usual. Her poetry reminds me of Mary Oliver. It is simple and matter-of-fact and focused on people and the natural world. Her story, though, is fascinating. She grew up in Indiana, and she attended Sarah Lawrence College and then received a Master of Fine Arts in Writing from Columbia University. Her first book of poetry was published in her mid-20s. It was entitled The Hocus Pocus of the Universe, and it was judged by William Stafford as the winner of the Walt Whitman Award for Poetry that year. One might have imagined her to have a successful career writing poetry with a start like that. But instead, she went to nursing school at New York University and became a registered nurse, working in pediatric and adult oncology, and eventually becoming a founding staff member at Plaintree, a nonprofit dedicated to developing and implementing a patient-centered model of care in hospitals. In her 20 years there, the organization helped over 100 hospitals become more patient-centered. And Gilpin co-edited a book called Putting Patients First. She became director of member services for Plaintree and continued to work on her poetry. She got a sabbatical in 2004 from Plaintree to work on her second collection, The Weight of a Soul. In the foreword, she acknowledged the imminence of her death after a diagnosis of inoperable brain tumors. In the foreword, she wrote, "Poetry has always been my persistent passion, my voice, my means of communication. Unfortunately, death has become an unexpected deadline. At 56, I've been diagnosed with 2 glioblastomas, brain tumors, which have restricted my ability to continue to work. All my years as a poet and as a nurse are now woven together into becoming a patient. My images and metaphors from poetry, integrated into all I have learned as a nurse, are drawing me into the deepest role of becoming a patient. I have spent the last 30 years working on poems for my second book, The Weight of a Soul. Many of the poems I have included here bring together my own perspective, as well as my experiences as a nurse listening to patients faced with illness and death. I hope my years of poetry have provided enough insight." Both of her books of poetry are out of print, but if you look, you can find them archived on the web, and you can print them off or have a PDF copy to read. I strongly recommend that you read the poem, The Weight of the Soul, The Weight of a Soul. I will confess that it was originally in this sermon, and I cut it because I couldn't get through it without crying. But her poem, Life After Death, says, "The things I know, how the living go on living, and how the dead go on living with them, so that in a forest, even a dead tree casts a shadow. The leaves fall one by one, and the branches break in the wind, and the bark peels off slowly, and the trunk cracks, and the rain seeps in through the cracks, and the trunk falls to the ground, and the moss covers it. And in the spring, the rabbits find it, and build their nest inside, and have their young, and their young will live safely inside the dead tree, so that nothing is wasted in nature or in love." My friends, may nothing be wasted in nature or in love.